Look, look. What's going on? So I'm introducing you to Eddie here, who's our cat. And the reason I'm introducing him is because he is essentially a long-haired Russian blue, which is technically called a Nibelung. And he becomes relevant in this story. And so he says hi. He wants to get down now. Okay, so the reason why Eddie was relevant there was because he's a Nibelung breed, and the Nibelungs were named that breed because the cat breeder basically bred a Russian blue with a stray, with a long hair stray, creating a long-haired Russian blue, and the parents were named Siegfried and Brunhild. Ha! So the Siegfried myth in German Teutonic legend, or kind of mythology, was essentially the German version of King Arthur. So the Siegfried or Sigurd character shows up in a lot of the medieval stories, and essentially it's this German warrior and or prince, and he's like King Arthur or whatever. He accomplishes all these great deeds, fights dragons and all this, and he's in dozens of different medieval stories. One of them was called the Nibelungide, and a version of the Nibelungide was made into a series of operas by Richard Wagner in the 19th century, which became associated with kind of Germanic identity and German nationalism. So Siegfried's the hero of the story, and long story short of what happens in the Nibelungide series is that he wants to marry this princess, and so he has to prove himself through all these tests of strength, and then he wants to help his friend marry who he wants to, and his friend wants to marry Brunhild, who is the Valkyrie queen of Iceland, and essentially Siegfried tries to help out by helping with all these tests of strength so they both can marry who they want. One of the parts of the story is that Siegfried kind of tricks Brunhild, and or not tricks her, but he takes some of her stuff, her belt and something else. Anyway, Brunhild is upset at Siegfried, and she ends up in this version of the story, she ends up hiring these people to kill him, and because she knows where he's vulnerable. He's this unbeatable warrior, but certain parts of his skin are vulnerable, and so the traitors sneak up on him and stab him in the back. And that's one of the tragic parts of the story. Like, just like King Arthur, there's lots of versions of it. Some versions he comes out and lives happily ever after. This particular version, in which the Wagnerian operas did portray this stab in the back imagery, it was very powerful. And if you were German, you knew about it. It's the equivalent of like King Arthur pulling the sword from the stone, or being betrayed by his best friend and his wife having an affair. Like it's kind of that narrative trope that everyone understands. So, powerful imagery, the stab in the back image. And what you started to see after World War I was a lot of editorializing and feeling that Germany had not lost the war. It had been betrayed. Stabbed in the back, just like Siegfried. Like Siegfried, they were winning. They were powerful. And then suddenly they're not. So what happened? Someone betrayed them. And the thinking was this someone might be Jewish. So Germans were anti-Semitic for the most part. Jews made up a minority of the German population. They were about 1%, about 600,000 of them in Germany at the start of World War One. But World War One was kind of a hopeful time for Jews in Germany, because the Kaiser went a little further than some of the other world leaders in that he declared that, Germans are Germans, and this is the time when all Germans have to unite to save the fatherland. And that included Jews. And so a lot of Jews, German Jews, joined the military, and they served in high numbers. And before that, going back to the Middle Ages, Jews were discriminated against in various ways in Europe. If you'd have gone back to the year 1913 and you'd have told an average European, there's going to be a country in Europe that is going to blame Jews for something, and as a result, it is going to do its best to kill, murder, destroy millions of Jews in a horrible conflagration of death. If you'd gone back to 1913 and told someone that, and you asked them, what country do you think it's going to be? They probably would have said France. France had just gone through the Dreyfus affair in the prior decade. Anti-Semitism was a big part of that. And France had a history of tyrannical conquests back with Napoleon, and had a history of persecutions in the French Revolution. So most Europeans would have said, yeah, that sounds kind of like what's something the French might do. They probably wouldn't have guessed the Germans. Germans were prejudiced against Jews, but that's not really anything weird for Europeans in the 19th century, 20th or early 20th century. All Europeans, white Europeans, were generally anti-Semitic. But in Germany, the Jews had a few more opportunities. They were generally successful. Jews tended to go to college at a much higher rate than Protestant or Catholic kids in Germany. They tended to be more successful in business on per capita basis, and that was tolerated. They weren't allowed to be officers in the military, but some of them were allowed to be reserve officers in Prussia, and that was a pretty big deal for them, something that they were denied in a lot of other places. So you wouldn't have thought Germany was particularly more anti-Semitic than any of the other European countries. But it turned out that the particular circumstances of the end of the war made them much more so than they previously had been. By the end of the war, when the German public was suffering, people were looking for excuses, for scapegoats to explain why everything had gone wrong. This was a tragedy of the propaganda. The propaganda had told them they were winning, and then suddenly the army just ceases to exist, and all the soldiers come back in these Freikorps units, and they're just told, yeah, we lost the war, and we actually lost it pretty bad. And the public was just shocked. They couldn't believe it. And so they thought, what had gone wrong? Maybe it had been the capitalists. So a lot of blame went to capitalist profiteers that had somehow been cheating, and the capitalists a lot of them must be Jews, or a lot of them are Jews, and so they must be at fault. And then others said, well, maybe it's these socialist revolutionaries weakening us from within, and a lot of the social democrats, or a lot of Jews were social democrats or socialists, and so both capitalists and socialists got blamed, and in both cases there was this Jewish element to them that people blamed. And so increasingly in the 1920s, Jews became kind of a catch-all pejorative for traitor. And not just traitor, but grave dishonor and just black-hearted, subhuman, like just a not tolerable type of traitor. like unbelievable traitor, the worst that can possibly be. And so Jew became kind of a catch-all pejorative, and this was already the case well before the Nazis. So various political parties tried to make hay out of this, and you saw a lot of this kind of imagery. And so that people in Germany continued to believe that they had not lost the war, they had been stabbed in the back somehow, betrayed at home, and somebody was at fault. And it just so happened that there was a Jewish element in all the various malefactors that they blamed. And so pretty soon you just started saying, yeah, Jews were at fault. That just got worse and worse, but and the imagery was just so powerful because everyone in Germany knew what the stab in the back meant. That is when this awful betrayal happens, this awful, intolerable betrayal. So that continued. So we will pick up with that in the next unit. Thanks for sticking with it. I want to thank Eddie for participating, and yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one, which will come quite soon, I hope.